So for muscle fatigue, basically it's the muscle fibers that exist and they would love to contract, but they just can't respond to the stimuli anymore because they're just wiped out. Lack of blood flow, lactic acid fermentation is going to occur because those muscles, those tissues don't get enough oxygen. So they're going to start experiencing an acidic environment around them. There may be some ion imbalances on the sarcolemma. That goes back to the neuromuscular junction stuff, the lack of the electricity being able to be sent correctly because things are just all out of whack because those muscles are just working too hard and doing too much. Something that some of us may have experienced are muscle cramps, which is still involuntary contraction, but mostly due to the lack of ATP. So again, going back to the previous notes, ATP is required to allow the muscles to relax. And so if there's not enough energy in the system, like you're using too much energy to do things like play soccer, your muscles might not have the energy to relax. And so you experience a pretty painful situation of muscle cramp. Here are some possible causes of why some people get muscle cramps, including ion imbalance, which again is why places like creators of Gatorade and Powerade and things include things like potassium and sodium in their drinks because that they claim is going to help you recover and experience less cramps and things associated with exercise. Tetanus is basically the same thing. It's is all your muscles locking up involuntarily, but it's caused can be caused by bacterial spores, which produce a toxin that prevents the muscle cells from relaxing because neurotoxin, right, neuromuscular junction. This toxin is interfering with this system and causing the muscles to just lock up completely. And I don't know about the whole body, but certain muscles are locking up and can't relax. Your muscles are responsible for heat production, so that your body heat is the result of your muscle cells burning up energy, and that heat gets transported throughout the body by your blood. And as we talked about in the integumentary system, your skin and the blood vessels around it have a huge job in helping to regulate your blood pressure. So for muscle response stuff, we're going to go through some graphs, which kind of help to tie in kind of a lot of things from previous notes. And so the thing about muscles and nerves is there's a threshold stimulus, which basically means the muscle fiber either contracts or does not contract. There is no kind of contracting mode. All right, so the muscle fiber either contracts or not. And so that all or none response is sort of pictured here. The relaxed muscle, again, the actin filaments are here. The myosin filaments are here, kind of on the inside. So there's no such thing as a partial contraction. Either the muscle fibers contract or they don't. The fact that your muscles can increase the force is the result of increasing the stimulus intensity. The number of stimuli. And so let's look at the graph so this makes more sense. Basically, your muscles are in a condition of a negative voltage already, somewhere around like negative 65 is where they exist at rest. And so when the muscles contract, they're going through this period of passing like through zero to a positive voltage. Again, this is all something that can be measured by machines. This graph is talking about just the tension or the force that's being experienced or given by one muscle, basically. And so the beginning part where the graph increases shows the contraction, and the relaxation is obviously right after that. This is one single muscle twitch or a single contraction, same thing. And so not that this is very common, because a muscle twitch would be something like your eyelid twitching, right? Your muscles contract a little bit more or there's a little bit more contraction involved when you're lifting something or carrying something. So this is just a muscle twitch, sort of like this nervous twitch thing that we probably have experienced before, but are caused by different reasons than your body trying to do it. They're all involuntary. And so here's the force of the contraction again, which is caused by all because of the voltage changes that are occurring thanks to the nerve cell delivering the signal, and that signal continuing throughout, basically continuing throughout the muscle cell on the sarcolemma. And so this just explains what's happening during the graph, which kind of already went over. The number of signals, here's where it changes. The strength of the contraction, basically, is because of how many signals are sent, which is called summation, which will make more sense when we look at a graph, and the number of muscle fibers that are being activated. Again, muscle fibers either contract or they don't. The number of them, because of how many signals are sent, is what's going to cause the strength of the muscle, the force of the muscle to increase. The number of muscle fibers that are actually activated or recruited is called recruitment. Pretty simple. So here's a good example of a graph where your body is trying to pick up something that's kind of heavy, but you thought it was light, I guess. That's a good way to think about it. Like you pick up a cardboard box and you thought it was going to be a lot lighter than it was. So your body basically has to go like, well, wait a second, we did not pick up the box, so let's send another signal. Hold on, the box is still not picked up. Let's send another signal. That's a kind of cheesy example, but that's what's going on. Your mind thinks that it takes this much of a signal to lift the box, when really it takes more than that to get more force out of those many, many, many muscles to do the job, and then relaxation can occur. If you were to carry something, you're helping somebody move, and so you're carrying something for a great distance, which is more than certainly a muscle twitch or just picking up a cardboard box. Let's say that you're carrying that box onto a moving truck. Your muscles have to remain contracted for a period of time that's usually a little bit longer, and the whole time they're sending, your body's nervous system is sending more signal, more signal, more signal, more signal, and then keeping that signal sent so that that muscle remains in the contracted phase the whole entire time, so you don't drop the box. Maybe you're carrying someone's fragile kitchen items. You don't want to drop that box before you get to the truck, so your muscles stay contracted the whole time, which means, if you think back to the neuromuscular junction, those sodium channels are going to stay open. The calcium channels on the sarcoplasmic reticulum stay open, so those muscles are always, muscle proteins are always getting that calcium. The troponin is always getting that calcium, so they're always in the changed shape mode. So those myosin and actin are always interacting until relaxation, of course. Here's the recruitment of motor units. If you think about muscles that are bigger muscles that sort of keep you upright, like your back and abdominal muscles, versus like your eye muscles or muscles that are controlling your fingers. Muscles that will control your eye have many more neuromuscular junctions than a muscle that controls your back or just like sitting and standing upright. They'll have a lot less neuromuscular junctions because there's a lot less signal being sent if there's a lot less neuromuscular junctions. So one motor neuron that tells your muscle to do something, motor like move, is connected to many muscle fibers. The more fine of movements that are required, like your eye, would require more of these connections with the muscle. Something like your back muscles would require less of these connections. And so when the neuron sends a signal to contract, there are many muscle fibers contracting all at the same time. You can see how that kind of looks from this cross-section view of the muscle cell. A lot of these muscle cells will contract all at the same time. And so when you're talking about the strength of muscle being asked to create more force, there are more muscle fibers being recruited. So that's where the recruitment comes in. So there's some examples of sustained contractions and how those all kind of work together. Muscle tone is the result of muscles contracting even though they're like sort of at rest. We'll see some people like Muscle Magazine or something that are extremely muscle toned, where their muscles look like they're contracting the whole time. Well, they pretty much are. But these guys that are in all of us are important in maintaining posture. So like your back and abdominal muscles and neck muscles that sort of keep you upright. Here's the two different types of contractions, isotonic versus isometric, and you might have heard of isometric exercises, like yoga, isotonic exercise, like lifting weights, picking weight up, putting it down. Here are the types of muscle that we saw in the tissues unit when we studied histology, smooth muscle, cardiac muscle. There's a smooth muscle, there's a cardiac muscle, has those intercalated discs and a little bit of branching that goes on. Looks like these guys are not all grooving right next to each other. And then, of course, skeletal muscle, which is most of the focus of this unit, which is obviously just everywhere. So here are the functions of those different types of muscles, which we kind of already know, hopefully, if we remember them from Unit 2. Here's the difference between voluntary and involuntary, which again, if you remember what was going on during Unit 2, you're probably okay with that. In relationship to the lab, the grip lab, here's the slow twitch and fast twitch fibers. Basically, fast twitch fibers have they don't have the supply of blood, they don't have the number of mitochondria, the access to oxygen and glucose that slow twitch fibers have. And so these guys that are fatigue resistant, like say your posture muscles, can keep you standing upright all day, whereas a muscle that is gripping a pop bottle in a grip lab doesn't last very long because it's not a muscle that you would usually ask to do that kind of motion. So an easy way to think of those two things, like your posture versus like your arm muscles, a big difference between those two. Here's the different types of smooth muscle, which again you saw some of the stuff in Unit 2, but multi-unit smooth muscle is in sheets, or sorry, fibers rather than sheets. These are found in the irises of the eye and your blood vessels. This is helping to regulate your body temperature by those blood vessels increasing in diameter or decreasing in diameter. Visceral smooth muscle is found in sheets, and that's what's like lining your organs, like the stomach, for example. That causes it to helps to mix the food up with the chemicals that we'll get to in the digestive system. Here's the visceral smooth muscle stuff. They experience rhythmicity, which is the pattern of contractions, which brings us to the esophagus, which again we'll see in the digestive system, that those muscles have a wave-like contraction that's called peristalsis that keeps the food moving from entrance to exit, if you know what I mean. Neurotransmitters still, we're still talking about neurotransmitters, but in this case, in smooth muscle, there are some other neurotransmitters like norepinephrine. Cardiac muscle, because of those intercalated discs, do not need neurotransmitters, and that's what makes cardiac muscle so different. Obviously, the heart is just always contracting, and so that's pretty much a whole different system when it comes to contraction of cardiac muscle versus contraction of all the other muscles, because the cardiac muscle will just basically non-stop your whole life. Here are the structural differences for smooth muscle. Again, some of the stuff you probably saw and hopefully remember from Unit 2. There's cardiac muscle. There's those discs again that are helping to basically almost act as nerve tissue in a way. And here's the things that they have in common, smooth and skeletal muscle. And here's what only smooth muscle has. And again, cardiac muscle is just completely different. So we're not going to talk about the details of cardiac muscle contraction, but just so long as you know that they're extremely different, because the nature of what cardiac muscles are doing, basically contracting all the time. That's the deal. There's more calcium, there's more a lot of things, because again, they're just working a lot more than everything else. And then this is going back to sort of wrapping up back to the beginning of the unit. Oops, that's scooched over a little bit too much, but all things that we don't have to worry about too much. There's more of the structure stuff. Oh, just to remember that muscles are just tubes and made of tubes, made of tubes, made of tubes, made of tubes, and inside that muscle fiber or muscle cell there are still kind of tubes, tube-shaped proteins. So makes it kind of complicated, so spend some time getting to love those.